Today, we talk training camp news. We talk how to sort through the hype, both positive and negative. We talk about what we should be reacting to and in what moderation to make sure we don't make any mistakes. We talk camp takeaways, what news is noise, and what resources we use to sort through that, as well as trades involving players who are in the news right now in real leagues. Stick around for all that and more. Welcome into the Dino Construction Podcast. My name is Justin. Joining me today, we are full force with my co-hosts David and JP. David, I'm glad you're back because I'm going to need you and JP to carry me today. I am physically here, but moving from Germany to Colorado has taken a lot out of me this week. On today's episode, we celebrate the start of the 2024 season. Let's go. So much news going on. We are excited to break it all down with you. Sort of the start, of course. No games, but training camps. Summer break is over. People are signing contracts. Keep in mind, we are recording this on July 26th, so possibly something major is going to happen over the weekend. It will not be covered in this video. As always, we start with our community question. And David, what was last week's question?
Yeah, so last week's question was, how do you try to take advantage of training camp hype season? So JP, you want to go ahead and read our first answer?
Absolutely. The first one we got here is from Awesome Dumplin. He said, I think I do what a lot of people try to do. Put guys who are hyped up on the trade block, send stats, post sick plays. Most of the times it comes up empty, usually. I think as humans, we're all too afraid to take risks and fail, so most of it goes nowhere. I try not to buy too heavily in on hype and just stay patient. And David, what is the next response we got?
Yeah, this one's from Trav Bob. He says, off-season hype is best for selling vets that never broke out and probably never will. Gives you a chance to sell when before they had no market. Even if it's from no picks to a third, I'll take it and run. That's some great advice. Justin, you want to go ahead and read our next response?
And our third response from Jay Mamana in our listener league also helped us out in our mock draft episode. Best way to take advantage of training camp hype, in my opinion, is to sell your lower tier role players. Usually RBs, but also some sleeper wide receivers for draft capital. Jarrett Patterson is buzzy because he's taking first team reps with the Chargers, but he's probably not good enough to actually do anything and certainly not to retain value for any length of time. Any capital, even nothing draft picks, is probably better than these sort of players. Nothing draft picks, he means a fourth. Conversely, buying players who are talented but bury on depth charts to stash this time of year never hurts. So again, that talent, not just opportunity. With RBs, though, opportunity is a thing that matters quite a bit, but we all know that Jarrett Patterson getting that opportunity, injury related, not something we expect to continue. Gus Bus should be ahead of him again in no time. I do remember Jarrett Patterson, though. He was the Washington Commanders. He won me a championship like 4 years ago, though, with like that touchdown. So, I mean, he's got a place in my heart, just not on my dynasty teams. And for me, my answer to this question, just briefly, I'm going to say that not overreacting too much is really key. Keeping an even head. Training camp heroes have certainly gone on to have great regular seasons, but way, way more have gone on to do nothing as far as fantasy is concerned. So if you're looking to buy somebody, don't look to overpay for someone unless you're willing to take the risk that third or the 2/3 that you pay for this guy that's probably worth nothing burns. If you're okay with saying I'm lighting this on fire, you can go ahead and light a pick on fire. Just know that you're probably lighting a pick on fire if it's like truly like a from nothing to something type of guy, and just say I'm having fun with it. We don't recommend doing that very often. If you have a team, don't do it more than once on one roster, and we might not even recommend doing it once unless you really just want to have fun. But there's a lot more that goes to exactly how to handle the positive and the negative types of hype as well. I didn't want to steal everything from David, though, because our processes are the same, and he actually went through the work of writing everything in the show sheets. So, David, walk us through how you handle positive and negative news a little bit more.
Kind of hit the nail on the head there, Justin. Don't overreact in either direction. Packers fan, there's almost always an undrafted wide receiver who gets a ton of hype, and I remember Jake Kumro, Aaron Rodgers was talking him up every press conference. I was like, oh, he's going to be an impactful player this year. I don't even think I think he made the 53, I don't know if he saw any playing time on offense. So, people are trying to hype up their buddies. As we heard in our responses to our community question, people are trying to hype up players on their team. So it's just got to be careful what you're listening to, what you're buying into. If a player's getting hyped up, definitely look into the situation and try to figure out if you think they actually have a path to being impactful. Like last year, we saw Kyron had a great camp. Akers was doing all right. We also saw their usage with Cam Akers since his injuries. They didn't really show a lot of trust in him. So I think Kyron was a good buy last year based on that. But so many times a guy gets hyped up and he's blocked on the depth chart by elite players ahead of him or really good players. That guy doesn't really stand a chance to gain much production. So if you can sell him and run, like Trav Bob was saying, that's what you should do. As far as negative reports go, I actually kind of like to buy into those. These guys are working on things to get ready for the season. They're not trying to look impressive right now. Like, sure, they want to look good, fine. But like, especially if they already have their roles set, they're working on different parts of their technique. They're trying to improve things. And sometimes that can look bad when you're first trying out a new thing. The thing that comes to mind was Jamar Chase's rookie year and his drops. That was by far the best buy window in his career. Don't be afraid to lean into the bad reports if it's a good player. That being said, if it's bad reports on someone in a positional battle, that's kind of bad. And you want to look deeper into that situation before you think about buying. You might even want to think about selling low in some situations. But just make sure you look into the depth chart and you actually think to yourself, is this reasonable that this player gains or loses value based on their standing? And just work from there.
Yeah, and I do remember, I believe it was last offseason or it could have been 2 off seasons ago, JJ Watt on a podcast actually touched on that specific point of NFL teams are trying all of these new things, all of these new formations. QBs are making throws they wouldn't normally make to see how you can do it. People are running routes that they might not normally run, so they might not look crisp. They might not be getting separation because they might be running different routes. That being said, like, don't forgive everything, absolutely, but take everything with a grain of salt. What David's saying about doing the extra work, the extra research, you hear the same thing from NFL players that don't take too much into it. So that's an amazing point there, David. And JP, what's your thoughts on the question?
I think the Jamar Chase thing, what's really important with that is the drops was not a problem in college. So that something when it's out of nowhere like that wasn't a concern before. Yeah, I think you usually just kind of want to dismiss that overall. I mean, if it's something that was a big problem in college, like Quentin Johnson catching the ball, and it's a problem in training camp too, yeah, then I'm gonna start raising up a flag in that kind of scenario. But David, I mean, you mentioned with Kyron Williams the training camp talk last season, and I think we can learn a few things from that. And my takeaway is that it was a few things, right? There were reports that Kyron was going to have a bigger role than expected, and that worked in conjunction with reports that Cam Akers was not going to be the workhorse. So you had these two things that were working towards, pushing up Kyron as a guy that you want to have on your roster. I think what was important is that Kyron, he's also free. That's really what I'm focusing on is guys that are free, especially guys that are rookies or second-year players. If they're free and they're on your waiver wire, or maybe, like Justin said, if it's the guy you have conviction in and you want to send a fourth for, those are the kind of guys that I might be willing to take the chance on because he had a path to be the RB2. We have not seen Cam Akers be the guy that we wanted him to be. So I think that when you're seeing multiple things work together, I think you want to pay attention. And also, speaking about guys who are free, Mike Tomlin, he talked to Jaylen Warren. David, you mentioned you took advantage of that in a big way. And he was free, right? So you want to take shots on these guys that are free if they are getting buzz, but you don't want to pay for guys based on buzz. If their price is rising, you can see in Keep Trade Cut the biggest risers and fallers. If this guy's rising a lot just based on buzz alone, don't do it. Don't buy it. If you can sell, I'm going to do it. Sometimes it's easier. Sometimes, like we saw in the community question, Awesome Dumpin said, it's not always successful, but you at least want to try in these scenarios. And the last thing I wanted to say was, beware of the random beat reporters just giving their opinion, right? If you just hear this one-off beat reporter saying something that they think, there's something that was their takeaway in camp. Like the Javonte Williams, there was that beat reporter, he said about Samaje Perine versus Javonte Williams. We didn't hear Sean Payton say that. So I'm not going to overreact to something like that specifically.
And on what you were saying there and what Austin said about the buy windows, like that you can't necessarily sell these players. Like, I think I heard this from Scott Connor a while ago in a Destination Devy episode. This would have been probably almost a year ago now, where he was talking about the biggest misconception people have is that when there's this positive news, that there's this opportunity to sell this player for more. A lot of the time, what there really genuinely is an opportunity to sell this guy at the cost that he was available for before the news broke. So now it's just a question of, do you need or want this player on your roster based off of your construction? Because like the realistic thing is you probably can't sell this guy for a second if he was worth a third before. But you can probably get that third that he was worth before. So if you would have wanted to clear him for a third before, it might be a good move to sell at what you thought the price was before the buzz as well. Not saying to sell low on people if you genuinely think like they're actually worth more than a third, not to sell like low on them, not to overreact and say I need to get this guy off my roster or anything, but that the buy window might not be at a higher price, but just at what the market value was before. It was something that kind of opened my mind when he said that, in thinking like it might not be as sexy to take a third for this guy that's rising on keep trade cut. But realistically, especially if I do that research David was talking about earlier and I see, I mean, he's buried behind studs. He's not going to get an opportunity unless those guys get injured. So by the time the regular season starts, he's back to being worth a third, but nobody wants to pay that for him. So that type of thing is something I really want to try to keep in mind during this time. But it's not always easy to be disciplined because these names are fun. David, what is our next week's community question?
Yeah, real quick, I just want to touch on that, Justin. I think that was a great point. I think we all pay attention to training camp news, right? We all see the hype going around. Nobody wants to it's like a used salesman trying to sell you the car. Like, yeah, we get it. We see this too. Maybe sometimes you find a guy who likes a player, then he sees them getting hyped up and he thinks he's buying on that player's way up and you can actually sell high. But like you said, a lot of the times you really get a window to sell that player at cost, maybe a smidge above. But that just goes back to what you were saying earlier about not overreacting in either direction. So I think that was a good way to wrap this up. For next week's community question, with the clock transitioning basically to redraft season here, a lot of Dynasty players play redraft. We play some redraft. We love Dynasty, but we play some redraft too. So we are wondering, in what ways can you apply your Dynasty process to the redraft format? Just how can we use this knowledge that we've built up all offseason and not misuse it, but use it to better our chances to win money in redraft? So let us know in the comments below. Justin, where else can they respond?
You can reach out to us on X at DinoConFF. All of our individual Twitter handles also in the episode description, or at DinoConstructionFF@gmail.com as well. We love your responses. We will read the first 3 that we get on next week's episode as always. Looking forward to hearing from y'all. So transitioning to camp takeaways. Camps have opened. We're going to break down some of the most relevant news from the first few days. JP, why don't you start us off with a few items that either are important or perhaps are just your favorite players?
Well, this is one of my favorite players, but it is unfortunately not good news. And it is that Ricky Pearsall, unfortunately, he suffered a hamstring injury and he's going to start camp on the PUP. Now, on X, which you should follow Dino Construction at DinoConFF on X, I post about hamstring re-injury rates being the highest among all injury for any skill players at a 33% re-injury rate. So I don't love that as a Pearsall owner because now his chances of re-injury are going to be higher in season. It's also unfortunate that it's a rookie that is set to miss the first few weeks of training camp. So that's where a lot of learning is going to be happening. But Pearsall, he wasn't going to be a huge part of the offense, assuming he was going to be the wide receiver 3 or 4 to start the year. But I will say that at least he can develop the mental part of the offense, learning all the intricacies and how the scheme works and what he's going to be doing within that scheme. So I think that it's not completely terrible for him. And he's more of a 2025 guy for them anyways, outside of maybe a Debo, Brandon Ayuk injury situation where he'd probably step up there. But still don't love to see that. And that's something that I want to monitor.
Yeah, never love to see that. I'm going to just rapid fire a few bits of news as well. Kadarius Toney getting snaps at RB. To me, if he's free off of waivers, otherwise nothing. Same for you guys. Even then, I probably don't want him unless I really have just wasted roster spots. CeeDee Lamb holding out. He will get paid. I have no doubt about it. If you have a buy window on him, woo, go buy. And he's worth 3.5 firsts easily. If you have the liquidity to do that, don't do it if it's going to handcuff your team, of course. Brandon Ayuk, he's requested a trade, but he is still participating. We're obviously he's not content, but he's there. To me, it's not really news. I don't expect anything to happen. If you have the ability to buy off of it at at his fair market price, you could make that. Joey Burrow, the news on him is the haircut. This man looks like the real Slim Shady. Oh, sorry, what's that in the show needs? Oh, his wrist is fine too. But let's get back to the hair. No, so obviously good news, he's healthy. We have some concerns about that earlier in the season. I think there was somewhat more of a buy window on him previously. That's probably closed. So good news for my contending teams where I have him. Deontay Johnson. JP, what exactly was that quote from Canales?
Where's Deontay at? That's what he's thinking about.
He is the first read in that offense, and they're going to scheme everything around how wide open this man is. In our underpriced players episode last week, talked about how he had the number one ESPN open score since 2020, which is crazy. Like, this guy's been more open than Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson, these guys that are just premier guys from ESPN's open score. You love to see that. He's been rising on Keep Trade, cut from wide receiver 47 to wide receiver 43 as of today, July 26th. And I think he might keep rising a little bit in value. That being said, he's not worth a first. He's not going to be worth a first. Don't pay a first for him. But depending 2 seconds, I can see that as a price. That's what I said in that other episode. And the last one, do I have to talk about Quentin Johnson? I don't want to. Someone else handle that one. What did that? I don't care.
I don't remember what Harbaugh said, but he's speaking highly of him. I think he's going to do that until they figure out their wide receiver room. And, look, we saw Quentin Johnson with opportunity last year do absolutely nothing. He might be better than that this year, but better than absolutely nothing, still not very good. So I wouldn't read too much into that one.
Zero interest. No. And if you can sell on this, if you can get a third to get out, we would take a third to get out of him. And David, some more important news, some quarterback news to start off. What do you got for us?
Yeah, mostly quarterback news here, but I'm going to sneak in talking about a running back. Biggest thing that's happened, just happened this morning as of recording. Tua signs his extension, 4-year, $212.4 million, 167 guaranteed. This gives him the 5th highest APY in the NFL, I believe. Certainly among quarterbacks, but that's probably NFL as well then. It likely means he's the QB there for at least 3 years, but probably indefinitely. I'm very interested to see how the community reacts because I think there was a lot of uncertainty on him and his future, and I think that was kind of priced in that way.
And I know you have him on the trade block in our listener league. I think he is a little bit more appealing now. I think you might be able to get a little bit more for him. Is your asking price going up when you're selling him now based off of this news, or would you still kind of take what you were looking for beforehand?
Don't think my personal price has changed much because I've kind of had confidence that he's going to be there for a while. When it comes to high-end younger quarterbacks, I don't really like to sell low. I might be more willing to be patient now and not just take the best deal that I get. But I'm still looking to move him. I got an opportunity to trade for Lamar in the middle of that startup. So 2 is my QB3. I don't love holding excess value there. So I'm still looking to move him probably around the same price, though. I think other leagues, though, you will see a nice price increase.
Absolutely.
Next thing I want to talk about is a quarterback extension that has not happened yet. My guy, Jordan Love.
Have you or a loved one been hurt by a contract being signed after you've already fully recorded your podcast? You may be entitled to know that Jordan Love has signed a mega deal. So obviously we did not know about the Jordan Love contract at the time of recording. And his 4-year, $220 million contract extension, making him the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, $155 million guaranteed, $75 million signing bonus, does not really change very much for us. We expected something along the lines of a huge deal. Maybe not highest paid, but to be fair, it's always going to be the youngest guy, the next young guy that doesn't have flags on his contract, that does not have a bunch of red flags, is always going to get that next biggest and that next biggest and that next biggest contract. So nothing too crazy here. If anybody had any doubts about him, obviously there's still concerns about the fact that he is primarily a passing quarterback, does not run a lot. That limits upside. So he probably at a ceiling would fit into the Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, CJ Stroud tier. However, is not really highly recognized there. Although some people probably have him above Herbert right now. This doesn't really change a huge amount of things besides if you had concerns about longevity, which we didn't. So the good news is now what we were talking about, we will see him working with all of these players in camp. There will not be this hold-in situation. So this should help us get some more insight into what is going on with him, into what is going on in the wide receiver room as we see usage with the actual first team with the starting quarterback. But not too much actionable here. Just wanted a quick update on what's going on now that we have the news. Of course, always after recording. Back to you, me, or whoever was talking.
The next thing I just wanted to touch on real quick is Javonte Williams. There was a little talk before camp opened that he might be in a battle with Samaje Perine for a roster spot. Kind of seems like maybe that was a little overblown, maybe some summertime clicks trying to drive. Looks like he's slimmed down a bit. Sean Payton's spoken highly of him. He's looked explosive. He looks healthy. You know, a long way to go in camp. I'm still predicting him to be the RB1 there. And the last things I want to just touch on some quarterbacks that are returning from injury. As Justin mentioned, Joe Burrow's a full go with his new due. We'd love to see that. Anthony Richardson, no restrictions to start camp coming off that shoulder injury. Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins are both cleared from their Achilles. Did see that Cousins' usage in camp will be limited, but he's older, coming back from an injury. They've got a rookie quarterback they want to get work in. That just makes sense to me. Daniel Jones seems to be cleared. He's taken every first-team rep, and that is the plan going forward. So nice to see these quarterbacks healthy to start camp.
That quarterback news, really good to hear from the Achilles quarterbacks. That has been a big concern of everyone. So being full goes, we don't care about these guys don't need the mental reps, right? They just need to be healthy. And if they're medically cleared, they don't need physical reps. They don't need mental reps. They need physical reps, but they don't need every single one. No problems. You love that for those weapons. So that has to instill a little bit of confidence in everybody who has their weapons, especially. And JP, what kind of things are we looking for? Which things do we care about, and which things really seem to be just noise so far?
The things that I'm looking for and what I think is most important is about guys who aren't established. I alluded to it earlier, the guys that are, that cheap or free kind of category of player. Yeah, I don't need to hear a coach talking up Lamar Jackson. Like, I know he's good. I don't really care about that kind of stuff. But if you hear nothing from a later drafted rookie, I'm going to pay attention. Like I said, no hype for a stud. It's fine. I don't really care if I don't hear anything about Patrick Mahomes. But no hype for somebody like Isaac Guerendo. That might mean that he gets cut or is only a special teams kind of a player. So that's the kind of thing I'm looking for, which I think that's kind of a low-key interesting battle between Guerendo and Cody Schrader. I think one of those two guys will make the team. But when it comes to wide receivers, I think for them to get volume, they just need to be talented. They need to be able to get open. They need to be good. But for RBs, that's up to the coach mainly. Will they split the backfield up? Will they use a workhorse, or do they prefer a certain kind of skill set more? So I'm going to care more about the running back news, particularly because we know volume is king at running back. You can give them opportunity. Wide receiver, like I said, they got to be good. So unless it's a rookie wide receiver, I care more about the role-based news for that running back position.
And it is something to keep an eye on, too, with running back news. Pay attention to coach speak about perhaps like the intangibles as well. Because if they say like this guy, we trust this guy in pass protection, we don't trust this guy in pass protection. If you can get like a read on who's going to be the third down back, and you can pick up that guy off of waivers, third down backs are usually worth 2.5 to 5 points a game from the 2-minute drills at the end of halves. In a PPR league, 2 or 3 dump offs in the game is 4.5 points, right? So keeping an eye on that type of stuff, like JP is saying, like the RBs, because opportunity, they don't have to be good. If they catch the ball and fall down, that's a point, right? So good point, JP.
Yeah, that's the old Zach Ertz way. Just catch the ball and fall down. Jason Witten.
Tyler Lockett.
The one bit of news that I don't really care about for a running back is that they're going to be using the slot. We hear this all the time, and some running backs do take some slot reps, but it's pretty rare for the most part. I think it's just these guys, they aren't full go, and they're just running routes on 7v7. They're kind of working up to, what they're actually going to be doing. So I don't care about that. RB in the slot. Maybe Kadarius Toney works in there, but I'm not that interested.
RBs in the slot, we hear that every year. I have never seen that to really pay off. I don't have an example that comes to mind where it really paid off on a deep manner. Antonio Gibson in the slot, right? We hear this every year. If you think of someone who did, comment in the comments below. Let us know who we missed. Do you have anything else to add to that question about what types of things you are trying to pay attention to?
Yeah, I got a few little things to add. I think in general, and shocker here, but the more time you can devote to each team, the more you're going to know about them, the more you're going to understand the situations. So it kind of depends on how much time you want to invest and where you want to invest it. The best thing you can do is listen to the head coach press conferences, in my opinion. They're not going to tell us exactly what they're going to do, but you can get a feel for what they want. You can kind of get a feel for how they're talking about their players. The next thing I'm going to say, I know JP said beat reporters aren't always accurate, but I do find them much more accurate than the national media when they're talking about their specific team. Do be careful, though. If it's a report or someone's opinion, those are very different things from beat reporters. They are there with one team every year, and their job is to report on that one team. National media members report on all 32 teams. And then I know we don't have a whole lot of time to do this. Thankfully, there's other people out there that devote their time to doing it for us. So follow some good accounts on X. The Coach Speak Index, at Coach Speak Index, is a great follow I found recently. This is something I thought has value in this space for a while now. And it looks like they're putting in the time and effort to do this correctly. They studied history of coaches' press conferences and how their words line up with their actions. So they give you a little extra context to what those coach press conferences are and how, what they mean, how accurate they could be. The other account I really like, 32 Beat Writers, it's at 32 Beat Writers. And they just post relevant comments from all 32 teams from the beat reporters, like I was just saying. Probably plenty more out there. If you have other ones you really like, comment down below. I'd love to follow them. So yeah, other than just, devoting your time to paying attention, there are a few other things that I wanted to touch on. We kind of touched on earlier in this episode. Injuries, as JP said, that's probably the most relevant single bit of news you can pay attention to. Whether it's something that's going to cause a player to miss a portion of the season, that's important. Like JP said, the re-injury rate on hamstrings is pretty high. We don't like seeing players enter the season with a nagging hamstring injury or other soft tissue injuries in general. The other part of that is if it's an injury to a rookie, like in Pearsall's case, he's missing some very important time to learning the offense, learning things about the NFL that could help him get off to a hot start. We saw this with Jason last year, had that wrist injury that really hampered the beginning of his season. So I don't like when I see a rookie get injured. It's not going to make me sell them, but it will change my expectations for early on in the season. A couple other little things to remember. Like we talked about, players are trying new things. So are coaches. Like running back in the slot. That could just be working out whether we can put this guy in 5 wide and motion him back into the backfield or something. We saw Deneric Prince being the first guy behind Isaiah Pacheco. Does that matter? Maybe. But they already know what they have in Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Maybe Prince just had a great offseason and they're trying to reward him with some RB2 carries or something. You just never really know. But these coaches are experimenting too. So don't forget about that. The last thing I'll mention, we talked about a couple of contracts here. These guys holding out right now is pretty much the only real leverage they have, especially as rookies. They're probably going to do it, even if that means they're going to play no matter what. We haven't seen too many players hold out into the season and have success with that, so I don't really expect that to happen ever. I mean, in Ayuk's case, he's already practicing. Love's at the building. I don't really care about players holding out right now, especially if they're established studs.
Yeah, I do like Coach Speak the most. I love hearing, their thoughts specifically. And one thing that I really think is interesting is when a coach mentions a player unprompted, because, reporters are always ask you, oh, how's Javonte Williams looking? But if they're just asking a question about the team or a position and they unprompt, say a player's name, that means that that's a player that first came to mind. They were most impressed by this player, most likely. So that's something where I do kind of, I find those little nuggets interesting. It doesn't make me change things drastically, but I think that is pretty important to look for.
Absolutely. All really great stuff. Thank you guys for putting that together for our listeners. I promise I'll work more on the show sheet next week. And we are going to transition to our trade segment where we are going to break down trades from dynastydaddy.com involving some of the players we just talked about. Let's go to David for our first trade. We have a good tier down here. 12 team, start 9, half tight end premium, so 1.5 tight end premium. Do you want Jordan Love or Dak Prescott and Michael Pittman?
Yeah, this one's tough because, well, I should take the package, and I probably will take the package. I don't really love Pittman. I think he's priced at his ceiling. I mean, he's solid, but is he a game breaker? Dak's older. Is he going to gain much value? I think Love is definitely the highest ceiling of this group. But man, I mean, Dak and Love are going to produce about the same level for several more years still at least. And you're getting, back end wide receiver 1 at the high end and at least probably a solid wide receiver 2 for several years. I think I'm going to take the package reluctantly, even though in real life, I might try and find something else.
JP, I think you and I, in a start 9 where we don't need to split assets as much because we only need to make 9 starters, I think I could see taking Jordan Love just depending on what I need. That's the direction I think I lean in a vacuum unless I really need to split assets. JP, is that the same for you?
Yeah, and Jordan Love, I mean, of course, he's a lot younger, but I think just for the next couple of years, they probably project pretty similarly points-wise between Dak and Jordan Love. But yeah, I do agree. I feel the exact same way as you.
I don't know why you hate the Packers, David. I mean, is it something that to you?
I know. I love my Packers. I just try to leave my bias out of my process.
Next trade that we have, JP, we have a trade involving one of your very favorite players. We have a 12-team start 10, no tight end premium, Jalen Waddle, and a mid-25 first for Brandon Ayuk and a mid-25 second. I'm curious if your player bias is going to make you pick the side I think you will pick.
Now, look, I think Brandon Ayuk is one of the best wide receivers in the league. I think he's on that cusp of being a top 5 wide receiver, but actually, not too long ago, I extended my tier 3 wide receivers and I added Jalen Waddle and Nico Collins into that same tier because just based on our startup, I did see these guys pretty similarly. So I would take Jalen Waddle if I'm getting the first, even though I love Brandon Ayuk. Within the same tier for me, I'll take the higher pick here with the first over the second.
We'll get him next time, David. We'll get him to make the wrong choice next time. We just need to pick a player he likes even more, but I'm not sure there is a player he likes more than Brandon Ayuk. So maybe
That's a good point.
He can only raise them up so high.
David, for our third trade, we have one involving the real Slim Shady himself. Joe Burrow and a 26 second or Jalen Hurts in a 12-team start 11 for what it's worth, 2 tight end premium, probably raising the value of seconds a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes a second is enough to get me to move within a tier. When we're talking elite quarterbacks, though, it takes a little bit more. I think Hurts just provides the higher upside. With Joe Burrow being healthy, we forget he was hurt most of last season. When he is healthy, he's elite. But without that rushing upside, it does cap his ceiling a bit. I just don't think a second's enough to get me to make that move, especially a 26 second.
I mean, this reminds me of a trade you and I made in one of our leagues where I traded Joe Burrow, and I believe it was a 25 second for your Lamar Jackson. I think I got back some trash can running back. Maybe it was, not a trash can, this guy, I think it was Rasheen Ali, but again, a guy that to me was worth a 4th round pick. Very similar process trade in almost this, I think in the same setting there. Was the difference in that one that you were looking potentially to also get Lamar's points off of your roster since you were a full tank so that you think Lamar might score higher than Burrow type of thing? Or what's kind of the difference in that trade? Also 25 second being closer maybe, or what?
25 second helps a bit. The fact that I'm rebuilding and trying to gain assets there is a start 11 like this trade. I also think Lamar next year, at any point we could start to see a slight downtick with Lamar. We're starting to get to that point where his athleticism might become more human, whereas it's been superhuman for his whole career. So, if you put Lamar in instead of Hurts, I think I'm probably doing this with the 26 second still. Hurts, I think, has at least a few more seasons of top 3 quarterback play in him than Lamar does. So I was just mostly the longevity, I think, is probably the difference there. Not a huge difference. So I do think this trade is kind of close. The 26 second, it's just not quite enough to make me move here.
All right. I just saw the parallel, so wanted to go down that rabbit hole real quick. Thanks for humoring me as always, David. And JP, our last trade, we have 12-team start 9, no tight end premium, Javonte Williams or a mid-25 second.
I think that this is probably the fair price because third's definitely not going to do it if you're trying to sell Javonte. In a vacuum, I think I'm going to take the second just based on the fact that Javonte Williams, he does have upside, but there's also significant downside to him losing a role for 2025 and beyond. Maybe if I'm competing, I do it. But I think in a vacuum, I'm going to take the second most of the time.
Yeah, I think I'd want to explore first what else can I do with my second. Can I try to buy an Alvin Kamara or other things?
I'm curious if we think if Javonte gets cut, does that hurt his value too much? Because if he gets cut, what if he's the Cowboys' lead back?
I don't think he's going to get cut, but if he does, because I've actually heard the same speculation about Samaje Perine getting cut and going to the Cowboys as well. We love the Cowboys RB room, whoever, if there is a guy there that is the guy. Of course, that anyone going there that we believe in any way, a little bit like condemning if he does somehow get cut. You never like to see that. Hopefully we don't see that. That will do it for our trade segment. Did you agree with David and JP, or do you think they missed out on any of these? If you disagree, let us know why down in the comments below. And thank you for joining us for another episode of the Dino Construction Podcast. We hope you found this as helpful for you as it was for us. Please remember to like and subscribe wherever you view. And from all of us here at Dino Construction, until next time.